at Church History 101. My name is Chris de Wet and I will be your lecturer responsible for this module. Church history sounds like a very, very boring subject, and recently I read on Facebook that one of the students mentioned that he's not so much interested in the history of the church as he is interested in the future of the church. And I laughed to myself because I thought if you want to know where the church is going, you need to know where it came from. And that's what church history can help us with. Church history helps us by understanding where we come from as a church. And it looks at the most important moments in the earliest years of the Christian church. In the first year of church history, we will look at the first 1,000 years up to the Reformation. And that is a very, very exciting time, formative years in the history of the church. Now, you as a student, the first thing you will probably ask is, how will I be assessed? How will I be examined? How will you assess my knowledge? So let's talk about assessment for a moment. Your assessment takes place on two levels. You've got formative assessment and summative assessment. Formative assessment takes place throughout the semester. In other words, it's ongoing. This implies, firstly, an assignment. There is an assignment that you have to complete, and you also need to write a test. That will be your formative assessment, and that takes place throughout the semester. And then at the end of the semester, we've got summative assessment. That comes in the shape of an exam. Now let's talk about each of these. You will find when you read your study guide or your reader that after all the administrative information, there is a section where I go through every week of the module with you. Now you'll see after every section there are some questions that you need to answer, and these questions, one of them at the end of every lesson is an assignment question. It's stated very, very clearly in your reader. Take note of these questions. Your guidelines for answering the questions are given there very clearly, and there are a number of questions that you need to answer for the assignment. I need to warn you, don't leave this for the last minute, please. Start with it immediately when you receive your reader. Start reading the work, answer the questions, and these questions will then form your assignment. Then you've got a test, and the same counts for the test. There are questions that you need to answer with your self-assessments, and these questions will be in the test. So there won't be any questions in the test that you haven't seen in the reader. So assessment is in fact very, very easy. I'm not there to try to catch you out. I'm not there to make life difficult for you via assessment. I'm there to see if you know the work. That's the most important part. Then the final questions for the exam are also in your reader, and they are in the final sections of your self-assessments. If you have any problems with this, if there's anything that's unclear about assessment, you need to contact me immediately and I will certainly help you. All my contact details are also in the reader. What is the most important information I can give you? I can give you this information. Work every week on the prescribed work that is given for that week. It's also provided very clearly in your reader, and go through every week. Don't skip a week, because then your work becomes more, you'll become stressed, and you won't enjoy the course. And that's not what we want. We want you to enjoy it, we want you to learn from it, and we want you to make the contents of this course your own. So use all the questions, all the guidelines in your reader at the end of the reader to prepare yourself for your assessment and also to get to know the contents of the course. Now the first section of the contents is about historiography. Now what is historiography, you ask? Historiography is about the art of writing history. Before we can start looking at the history of the church, we need to ask, how was this history written? Because as you know, no history is objective. We always speak from a certain point of view. So in this essence, you need to understand that historiography is very important for understanding church history. How was the history of the church written in the first years, and how are we supposed to read it? So your first few weeks, you will only look at how history is written, and it will also teach you a lot about how you should write your own history. It starts off with the work of Deist and Leroux, and it shows us how historiography took place from the ancient times, from pre-modern times, the biblical times, up to the Middle Ages, and then after the Enlightenment period, where historiography changed a lot. Make sure you know this. There are questions that will guide you through all the difficult sections of the work. Then there's also a section on cultural history. That is not in Duyston Leroux. It is in the next part of the prescribed work, an article by Rudin. Now this article teaches us how to write cultural history. Now why did I give you this? Cultural history is very important because it helps us to understand the history of experiences and the histories of mentalities of people. And the most important figure in this instance is the work of Michel Foucault. He was a French philosopher who wrote a lot about how we write cultural history. Now that section of the prescribed work is very, very important. Make sure you understand it very well. Make sure you know the work and the method of Foucault very well, because that will help you later in reading the church history. After we've spoken about historiography, then we get to the real contents of church history, the real stuff that happened. I'm not that much interested in dates, but I'm interested in events and in persons that shaped the history of the church. And that is how I will ask you the questions, as you will see when you complete your self-assessments. The first few hundred years of church history is covered. It starts with the very start. Where does church history begin? It begins with Jesus. We start with Jesus and we move through the apostles, and after the apostles we look at the apostolic fathers. The apostolic fathers are the people who followed just after the apostles. And then we will look at some of the heresies, because heresies are also very important to understand how orthodoxy was shaped in the church. We will also look at the very, very first church fathers like Origen, and we will also look at the martyrs and the apologetics. And that is truly a piece of inspiring work. Church history will change your life, but you have to enjoy it. Please follow the guidelines I have given you. Don't leave anything for the last minute. Work on it. Work on it every week. Make sure you keep on reading. There's not a lot that you have to read every week. It's about 15 to 20 pages that you have to read. It's not a lot. You can do it in a day, and then you just need to complete the questions. Please, friends, I ask you, don't phone me at the end of the year or at the end of the semester asking for tips or questions. I am not going to give them to you. All the tips and all the questions are already in the reader. Everyone has them. No one will be privileged above anyone else. But you can phone me if you've got any questions or anything is unclear to you, and I will help you until you understand. Enjoy church history, and I look forward to discovering the essence of the church and the history of it with you.